Welcome to, I think, our third annual Winter Solstice Poetry Forum, co-sponsored by Creation Care and the 20s 30s group. And I'm Kathy Mensch, soon to be stepping down co-chair of the Creation Care Ministry, but so very glad to be here and see you all here. And I'll begin with the land acknowledgement and then turn it over to Doug Thorpe. St. Mark's Cathedral acknowledges that we gather on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, who are still here, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the life of all the Coast Salish tribes. Doug.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's been a wild morning already. Nice to see my grandchild Walter sitting back there with Nana. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O Holy One, God of light, God of darkness, God of sun, God of moon, be with us in these days as we approach the solstice, as we move more deeply into the darkness of the season. Let us find a way to welcome that silence, that depth, the beauty that is there in these December days. Be with us as we remember those who are out on the streets, who are struggling, who are fighting. Be with them, be with us. Keep us close to your Son, who is light, who is peace, who is love. Amen. So, solstice. It's a curious time because it's a time of extraordinary beauty, and it is also a time as we do move more deeply into a darkness. We know that in this northern hemisphere. I grew up in the Chicago area, and you definitely felt it in Chicago as we feel it here in Seattle. Sunset is around, anybody know exactly what time sunset is today? I'm thinking around 4:30, about 4:30, right? And sunrise? Well, my wife Judy, who's sitting out there, is running usually about 6 in the morning. And is it light? No. Is it light when you finish? No. Right, so she's running in the darkness at this time of the year. Yeah. So, and yet at the same time, there's something very beautiful about this season. Let's see, and there's a slide I need pulled up, and I'm not sure if he's back there at this point. I need it for the first poem. Yeah. And, yeah, where's Greg? And Chris, can you pull up the first slide? I sure can, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Part of the beauty and paradox of this season is that we think of it as a time of joy, a time of blessing, a time of family. At the same time, the birth of Jesus, of course, is a birth that takes place in December, in a stable. I saw at a church yesterday something about, welcome Jesus, a refugee, undocumented, brown-skinned baby welcomed into this world. So there is that. This image showed up on my Facebook page. I'm not sure if anybody recognizes it, but it's an actual photograph taken from northern Gaza. And they're a group of men who are firefighters and AIDS workers who have discovered, and you can see maybe, that there is a baby there. And it's an extraordinary scene at this time of year as we're heading into the birth of Jesus. And when I saw that image, I wrote a poem about it. So this is a nativity. There were bombed out walls and windows somewhere in the north of Gaza. After days of shelling in the middle of December, no shepherds in sight, no wise men following the brilliant declaring angels, no manger, no friendly animals, no songs and no Mary. There was no celestial splendor, no glory from on high, just a bunch of ordinary guys digging furiously, recklessly, following a sound or simply a hope, or maybe for some, a prayer, and just digging, pulling stone on stone, breathing hard in the cold air, and finally reaching down to a tiny hand, a baby wrapped, or yes, swaddled if you wish, and seeing again the light of day, hands reaching down, a group of guys smiling and amazed, a child alive in the rubble of Gaza. So that is an image of this season, right? That is a pretty honest image. Let's see. But as a slight contrast, this is a poem that I wrote some years ago based on a piece of music by a northern composer. I think he's Estonian, Petras Vasks, and it's called Distant Light. To name one's joy, to know what flesh knows, to know light as a leaf knows light, to know the way leaves sing inside themselves, as strings vibrate between our hands, the way everything still rings like a word breaking the silence of the night, to listen like a seed, to hear the world's pain as though buried within its cry, to name one's joy as though everything still ends in light. An Advent poem. Molly, you want to come up and share?
Thank you to Doug and the Creation Care Ministry. Looks like I'm their representative for 20s and 30s today. So Doug's asked me to share a poem that I wrote last fall about cycles and creation, seeing us humans as leaves in the symbol here and God as a tree trunk. So this poem is called Cycles. The leaves in autumn thrust their brilliance into the world, the wild. One last vibrant dance before surrendering their bodies back to the dust that they came from. What we see as a show of color is actually the leaves' parting gift to us. The final act in a story that is at once miraculous and mysterious. It is a beautiful goodbye as they depart from the hospice care that has been offered to them by the tree trunk itself. I am amazed by the knowledge that the tree must save nutrients to sustain itself through the cold, dark season that lingers ahead, the winter. It gently pulls the chlorophyll from the leaves back into its core, back into its center of being. The leaves offer this back, a gift of gratitude to the life force that once held them, a show of gracious love for the hospitality of their maker. The nutrients return to the giver, and the recipients kiss goodbye as their brilliance eventually fades. They are invited back to the source that they came from, the ground, the earth. As for the tree, it captures the essential elements back into its abdomen and uses this to support. They sustain the tree through the grief that inevitably comes with this cyclical pattern. Such grief, what a gift. It is a reminder that life can be fully experienced on these branches in this space of nurture. And so it is, the leaves pass away, the tree flounders through the raw grief of departure. We all bear witness to this powerful art of the cycle of being. The tree then waits in patient longing for the life that will once be birthed again, and it always does. Thank you.
And this is a poem for a friend of mine, Jane Hirschfield, who's a wonderful, wonderful poet. The angels do not want us to leave. Earth is the place they know and love. Division upon division, we tumble into our world like falling leaves, as splintered light. They watch with glee the whirling that we do. No wonder that they love us so. Strange characters written like foam over the shining seas. Kathy, you want to come and share some haiku?
So this is a set of haiku I wrote a couple weeks ago. I stepped out on my deck in the early morning and saw there were a couple mornings where the pre-dawn sunrise was just brilliant. And for those of you who know me, I've started writing haiku, and sometimes I write more than 3 lines. This is a set of 5 haiku that just I keep going until the thoughts are done. December dawn meditations. Early December dawn, with slowly rising light full of soft colors, catches my breath as I gaze and wonder at the sky's transformed beauty. A dawn symphony of vibrant red and pink streaks across the blue sky. This early brightness belies the resurgence of grayish winter skies. Despite the looming grays, these light pre-solstice dawns persist in my soul.
Since we're doing haiku, does everybody know the Japanese poet Basho? I mean, probably the great masters. Is this on? Can you hear me? There? Is that it? There? There? No? There. Okay. Basho, Japanese poet, I think from the 18th century. Most famously, the poem about frog into the water, splash. Basically, I'm paraphrasing the Japanese, but it's a form. It's really a form connected to Zen Buddhism, and these moments of enlightenment, a kind of moment of epiphany, an awakening, right? So a couple of other haiku. First one has a title for Vicky. Vicky was my high school girlfriend who just about exactly 50 years ago committed suicide. She was manic depressive, was schizophrenic, and just got worn out. So this is a short poem for Vicky. Your pain was too great. I held you in the winter night like breaking glass. Ashes to ashes, we drift through time like a song heard through a window. And this is for my mother, who died about 8 years ago. Some of you have had this experience of being in an apartment of a parent or a home and cleaning things out, right, with their absence. A Sunday morning emptying out her room. What else is missing? What ends? Branches, twigs, hands and fingers, feet and toes. You, me, all we know. A grateful but aging English professor sang one last ragged song. A single leaf clings to the bare limb of the tree. Practice surrender. So that's kind of a Zen mode here. So we move pretty quickly towards the solstice, as I was saying at the beginning. And my hope is, if there's anything to take away from this morning, that we remember to try to find moments in the midst of a lot of busyness. Because paradoxically, this is an extraordinarily busy time of the year, right? I mean, perhaps the deepest paradox is the church, where, gearing up for, the children's event on Wednesday, many services on Christmas Eve, Christmas morning, is an incredibly busy, intense time for families. And yet, it's also that time when we really are seasonally, biologically, we're invited to slow down, just to listen. One of the things that I try to do pretty much every night is when we're sort of, heading up to bed, Judy will wander up. I'll just step outside onto our porch. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever. I just step out onto the porch and just take a moment, right? And it's not even conscious prayer. It's just trying to pay attention. Many of you have heard me say at other times when I've been up at this microphone, that word attention comes from a Latin root, ad tendere, meaning to stretch towards, right? So attention, which is a rather abstract idea, really has kind of a physical root to it, to stretch towards. It's as if there are threads that connect each one of us. I certainly experienced this as a university professor, just sitting in my office with students, right? Where I am invited to attend to, same root, attending to someone, giving them your attention. If you know the French writer Simone Weil, she has an essay called School Studies. And what she says is that anytime we are giving our attention, and in her case, she's talking about studying mathematics or studying poetry, right? That we are giving our attention to something outside of ourselves. And she says that is a form of prayer. Inherently, it's a form of prayer, right? Where you are offering yourself for this. When we talk about university studies, we talk about what is your discipline? What are you studying? Your discipline. And the word discipline shares the same root as disciple. What are you discipling yourself to in your studying? Right? Whatever it is a form of truth. Whether you're studying biology or mathematics, sociology, it is a form of truth that you are exploring and trying to move more and more deeply into. And if it is a form of truth, then it is some aspect of Christ, who is, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Right? So wherever you experience truth, wherever you give your attention to something, and we know this when we experience it, right? These simple moments when we're invited into that holy space or liminal space. Ancient Chinese poetry, I think, beautifully captures some of that quality. It's a poem by the poet Li Pao, 8th century Chinese poet. Very simple. The birds have vanished from the sky, and now the last cloud drains away. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Right. So this, again, to me, is a solstice poem. That makes sense, right? That we are, and this is St. Paul or John the Baptist, right? Right? That I must empty myself, that word kenosis. I must empty myself to be filled with Christ, right? And this is the same emptying, I think. We sit together, the mountain and me, until only the mountain remains. Or Du Fu, also 8th century. Right? Most people would say that Du Fu is the greatest lyric poet probably ever in China. This is called Written on the Wall at Chang's Hermitage. It is spring in the mountains. I come alone seeking you. Addressed presumably to the hermit. He's going to a hermitage to see this holy man. The sound of chopping wood echoes between the silent peaks. The streams are still icy. There is snow on the trail. At sunset, I reach your grove in the stony mountain pass. You want nothing, although at night you can see the aura of gold and silver ore all around you. You have learned to be gentle, as the mountain deer you have tamed. The way back forgotten, hidden away, I become like you, an empty boat floating adrift. When I would share this poem, this is from Stephen Mitchell's anthology, The Enlightened Heart, which I highly recommend. You can find it if you wish to go to Amazon for a couple of dollars. And it's a really wonderful little anthology of sacred poetry from all traditions. The Psalms are in there, George Herbert, John Donne, my mentor William Blake is in there. And I would often use this book in classes with freshmen at Seattle Pacific University, where I taught. And most of you know, Seattle Pacific is an evangelical institution, Free Methodist. And so to be reading Chinese Zen poetry to a group of 18-year-old evangelicals was, a quietly subversive act. And I thought of it actually as an evangelical act. But many of those students, when I hit those final lines, the way back forgotten, hidden away, I become like you, an empty boat floating adrift. Right? What is the feeling there? Right? Positive or negative? What's your sense? Positive or negative? I come like you, right? An empty boat floating adrift. Many of my students felt definitely that this was bad. Yeah, that this is bad, right? An empty boat floating adrift, right? And that's, I think, a Western response in a way, right? In the context of the poem, I think following everything that has led up to that, as this seeker following the trail of the hermit, not finding the hermit, but finding this extraordinary sense of peace. Right? At sunset, I reach your grove, right? So again, it's this liminal space, right? It's like, if you know the Book of Common Prayer, evening prayer, right? Fos hilarum, the Latin. O gracious light, pure brightness of the ever-living Father in heaven, Lord Jesus Christ, holy and blessed. Now as we come to the setting of the sun, behold, your vesper light, right? I love the mystery of that because the beginning simply seems to be a statement about the end of the day. O gracious light, pure brightness, the ever-living. I mean, it's the vesper light. But it very quickly becomes synonymous, of course, with Jesus. Jesus as that light, right? And so here too, at sunset I reach your grove. You want nothing, although at night you can see the aura of gold and silver ore all around you, right? This contrast between the preciousness and the beauty of that, but not clinging to it at all, right? Just appreciating. You have learned to be gentle as the mountain deer you have tamed, right? So this is all setting this tone. And we know this in the Christian tradition as well. All those stories about hermits, ancient Christian hermits, taming a lion or taking the something out of the paw of the lion. I mean, that relationship. And so you get to the way back, forgotten, hidden away. I become like you. Right? And so there is this complete identification with surrender again. Full surrender to the way things are. An empty boat floating adrift. Right? And so if you can embrace that experience, rather than fear it, rather than feeling the anxiety about that image, because that, I think, is what most of my students felt. A floating, an empty boat floating adrift. That is not comforting. Okay? But we're invited, and I think precisely at this time of year, we're invited to feel, to let go into the stream and just to experience. Another really good example of this. This one I can pretty much do from memory. This is Dogen, 13th century Zen master, Japanese Zen master. And it's called On the Treasury of the True Dharma I. The title is almost as long as the poem. The true Dharma, the way of things, the path to follow. Midnight. No waves, no wind, the empty boat is flooded with moonlight. Midnight, no waves, no wind, the empty boat is flooded with moonlight. Exactly the same thing, right? And in Zen poetry, that image of moonlight is often an image of enlightenment. Right? And so that's the experience. Again, just pure surrender. There's a wonderful short poem by another a Zen guy who was thought of as a holy fool, Ryokan, who was a St. Francis character, right? Who gave everything away, went around in ragged clothes, and spent most of his time just playing with the kids, right? And he came back, he had a small hut with a book and a chair and so on. And one day he came home to his cabin, his hut, and found that everything in it had been taken, was stolen. Right? And so he wrote a poem that is something like, the thieves left it behind, the moonlight through the window. Right? Yeah. Same thing, right? Non-attachment is really the idea. Non-attachment. Excuse me. So we're talking about moonlight. So let's see. Can't do this without doing a poem of Denise Levertov. And many of you know Denise, one of the great poets of the 20th century, born in England, trained as a nurse, and served as a nurse through World War II. Was born around 1922, exactly the same age as my parents. My dad, 1922. Moved to America, married, was very involved in anti-Vietnam War work. Late in life, I got to know her, and she moved to Seattle, and so and she didn't drive, so she would send me a postcard. She didn't like using the telephone. She'd send a postcard and say, Doug, the Tallis Scholars are going to be performing at Meany Hall in about 3 weeks. I've got 2 tickets. If you're willing to come down to Seward Park and pick me up, the ticket, we'll go together, right? And so Denise's late work really is very much based on living down in Seward Park. And I mean, her house now, I believe it's still owned by her son Nikolai. And there is now a plaque out there noting the location of the house. But, so Denise, this is one of her first really Seattle poems. Settling. I was welcomed here. Clear gold of late summer, opening autumn, the dawn eagle sunning himself on the highest tree, the mountain revealing herself unclouded, her snow-tinted apricot as she looked west, tolerant in her steadfastness of the restless sun forever rising and setting. Now I am given a taste of the gray foretold by all and sundry, a gray both heavy and chill. I've boasted I would not care. I'm London born, and I won't. I'll dig into my days, having come here to live, not to visit. Gray is the price of neighboring with eagles, of knowing a mountain's vast presence, seen or unseen. And her home down near Seward Park, upstairs is where her study was, and from the small window in her study, I mean, she did have a view of Mount Rainier, right? And it's interesting because I mean, almost anybody in Seattle hearing that image of the mountain, right? I mean, we know exactly what she's referring to. One more Denise poem. This is called One December Night. This I had not expected. The moon coming right into my kitchen. The full moon, gently bumping angles of furniture, seeming to like the round table, but not resenting corners. Somehow the moon filled all the space and yet left room for whatever was there already, including me, and for movement. Like a balloon, the moon stirred at a breath, and unlike a balloon, did not rise to the ceiling, but wandered as if sleepwalking, no more than a foot from the floor. We can all imagine this, I think. And last night, the moon last night was extraordinary, right? So that's what Denise is describing, just that moonlight flooding into her kitchen. Music accompanied this lunar visitation. You would imagine harp or lute, but no. I'd say it was steel drums, played with an airy, whispering touch. Those scooped concavities might serve as moon mirrors. The greenish tint of white spider chrysanthemums resembled the moon's color, but that was lighter. Okay. One more, and we'll close with this. And this is, not sure how you describe this, a parable of sorts. And again, kind of an incarnation parable. Let's imagine an elephant sitting in a tree, brooding over a warm egg in a small nest. Why is the elephant in the tree? There is no one else to sit on the egg. The mother is dead. The father is in prison. The elephant does not belong in the tree. Elephants are big. They are beautiful and, in their own way, graceful. But elephants do not climb trees. But the elephant saw the nest, saw the egg, and climbed the tree. It's true, we cannot easily imagine the elephant climbing the tree. And even assuming that the elephant somehow managed to get up there, there is still no reason why the weight of the elephant does not crush the egg or break the branch upon which the elephant sits. In short, there is no logic that will explain how the elephant got up there and stayed there. And so, of course, we cannot easily imagine this, but the fact is, we can imagine it. We can imagine anything we want to. There is no prison anywhere in the world that can contain, detain, or restrain the imagination. All we need to know is that the elephant is in the tree, sitting on that egg. There he is, waiting for it to hatch. Thank you. We got a couple minutes if there are any questions, or if somebody is just, sitting out there waiting to read a poem, that's also, mic is available. Questions? This one, The Enlightened Heart, edited by Stephen Mitchell. Yeah, it's been out for decades, and it really is a wonderful collection. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much, and those of you heading to church, enjoy.